Hello everybody, welcome to another one of these Fotospeed photographer chats. I'm joined by Tim Jones as ever, and joining us today is fantastic Terry Donnelly. Terry, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you, Sam. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. I'm good, and we're dotted about the country. You're up in the northwest,
I
my
am
original
indeed.
stomping grounds, and I'm down here on the Dorset coast, and Tim's over in Wiltshire. And actually, Terry, we're going to talk about quite a lot of different things today because I think one of the great things about you is the broad variety of work that you take part in as a professional photographer, commercial work, architectural work, professional portraits, shooting Champions League football we might get to, and also some of the wildlife work that you've been doing in the last couple of years. So it's really, from my point of view, it's nice and exciting because we've got loads of topics to hit. But I think just as we kind of kick off into that, it would be interesting to know a little bit more about your background and how you came into the photography world as a working professional, because that's something I've seen you talk about certain projects and things, but I've never really got into that story. So if you can give us a couple of minutes about that and what your motivations were and how your career path has developed, and then we'll get into some of the specific work.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like everybody else, I was into photography at school. Loved taking cameras apart, putting them together, learning about all the different aspects of them. Um, when I left school, I sort of came away from photography a little bit, and I was involved in some professional video production. And then I left that and went through a number of career paths, shall we say, and pretty much came away from photography. I used to do the usual thing what everybody does, taking pictures of the kids, your pets, holidays. But beyond that, I didn't really delve much further. And that was until 2008 when I became involved commercially with supplying images to construction companies. And from there, pretty much it developed. And they were pretty much just snapshots, to be honest. It was site recording. We were supplying to architects, local council, planning departments, investors in big, corporate companies who wanted progress reporting on a monthly basis. And then that work sort of came to an end naturally when contracts expired on certain large jobs. So from that point, then I'd sort of got that bug back for the photography. So I wanted to delve further. So I did a course with the Open University, which was a 3-month digital photography course, which was very beneficial. And one of the course tutor suggested I should then look at the Royal Photographic Society and progress on to do a licenseship with them. So I did that. I went and did LRPS, and as you do, you want to do then the ARPS. So I failed it the first time of asking. That's when I got into my printing, because I failed on print quality. There was a mismatch in the actual colour running through the panel. So that was my first delve into printing at home. I printed my own panel. We got that passed. And then it sort of went on from there. I was getting certain opportunities. One big opportunity I had was with a friend of mine, Ian Lesware. And I was out in the Channel Islands, and I came in touch with Ian, who was doing some event photography. And he actually did the horse racing out on the Channel Islands in Jersey, on Lisa Guernsey. And we was chatting away, got on like a house on fire with Ian, still a good friend now. And he just invited me to do some work for him at the horse racing. And then that evolved, and that's where my sport photography really came into its own. Then later, I got involved in covering football, rugby league, rugby union, gymnastics. But it wasn't never sort of a plan which I had, Sam. It just evolved as it went along. And then eventually the photography became much bigger than the sales work which I was doing. So it was a natural progression to step away from it. And that's basically the background, really. But having that sort of broad base of the background, it's helped me as well, because I've worked for some of the largest hotel chains in the world, some of the largest developers in the UK and the Middle East. And I used to fly to the Middle East every 6 weeks to work. So it's just all naturally progressed. I never really chased any of it. It was just opportunities that came along.
Well, I think that's interesting, and I think opportunity is one word, but I think those things tend to happen because you deliver what people are needing from the job. You do that in a timely fashion. You can communicate. People get on with you, and those things then start to come back, don't they? That's what I find anyway. And I think what's really interesting about you and your work is that you seem to be comfortable in a wide variety of situations photographically. But I know from a commercial side that also means you're comfortable with a wide variety of clients, understanding their requests. And I think professionally, understanding the brief is really important, isn't it? And do you find, how much of that do you get input in? Are there times where they just are very clear about what someone might want, and there's other times where maybe they come to you for a bit more creative direction? How do you feel that is these days? How much of that do you actually get to input, or how much of it, like I say, is reactive to what they're asking for?
Very much depends on the client. Some clients will give you a brief and say, we want headshots, we want the factory to look decent and tidy, we want the offices to look busy, people engaged, and they just say, yeah, can you just get on with it? And pretty much leave you to it. Other clients can be a little bit more demanding, shall we say, probably not the best word. But you're quite right. It's about delivering what the client wants and not necessarily what you think the client wants. And there has been instances where I've been given a brief and I've had the commercial director with me, working with me, and I'm thinking this could be so much better if you change this. But you've got to do what the client wants. Occasionally, I do breach it a little bit, where I'll say, "Have you thought about doing it this way or that way?" But usually, if they're very fixed in their mind what they want, they're going to be resistant to that. But as you just mentioned, sometimes you've just got to give the clients exactly what they ask for, and not necessarily what you think is best.
Mm. Yeah, it can be a fine line to walk.
I was always used to, they're the money jobs, aren't they, I suppose?
Yeah. I mean, I did one
as long as the check cleared.
I did one job, and it was quite a large job. It was 12 days, and the chap I was working with, it was a brand new hotel, and they had all the schematics done and the computer graphics done, the CGI of how it looks, but they wanted real photographs. So I had a spreadsheet of what they wanted, which room to be in, what was required, etc. All very, very specific. But then on the first showing, the chap I was working with, he said, "I want you to take the shadows off the wall." I said, "Well, that's coming from the light. I don't want that." Okay. And then he's asking for things like, I don't want the cables from the ceiling coming to the lamp. I said, "Well, that's what it looks like." And then it went on and on and on. And I said, "You're going to end up with exactly what you had before from the computer, from CGI." And sometimes you just got to make them aware, but you have to give them what they want, basically.
Yeah, that's the realities of it. But I think it's interesting that the realities of getting out and doing the work is sometimes not always you want to be with the camera, we want to make images. That is just like 10% of it. The other 90% of it is making the commercial side of it actually happen for people. But what we're going to do, we're going to look at some of your images as well, and we'll talk through that wide variety of work that you do. And I'm keen to find out what kind of really for you motivates you, if you had your own time, as it were, to get out and do more work. But one thing we wanted to touch on, especially because in May we've got this focus on the wildlife side of things, was the Red Squirrel Project that you did, and we've got a couple of the images here. So, just if you can, and these are fantastic, by the way. There's a couple of different variants with the jumping and with squirrels in situ, but maybe tell us a bit of the background about why you got into this, because I would guess this was a little bit different for you, so I'm intrigued as to how you got into this project.
Yeah, I mean, the Red Squirrel Project started it was I actually moved house, and I moved back up to Formby, which is close to the nature reserve, which has a colony of red squirrels. But what I didn't realise is that we have urban red squirrels in the area that I moved into. So these squirrels visit my garden each day. Very elusive, very shy, extremely difficult to get a good, clean image of them. So I set about enticing them down into the garden, which took a long time. It was a ridiculously long time, probably best part of a year. I built a climbing frame for them, and I got them down to regularly visit this area. Then I set about taking the jumping pictures, and then when lockdown came, I tried to make that a bit more interesting, and I started doing more of the illustrative type, which you can see with the saxophone. So it started off pretty much as a personal project, really, and then as it went through, I learnt more about the species, the risk of extinction they're under in the UK, the different diseases that affect them, like the squirrel pox virus. And the more I delved into it, the more I contacted different agencies. I spoke to the government agency who were dealing with a fertility control drug for the grey squirrel, different academic people. And I got really interested in what was going on. So I've used the photography since then to highlight the species decline. And even I've been in touch with His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales as well, who kindly wrote back to me about them. So the photography's been really powerful in breaking down barriers and enabling me to reach people outside of the norm, really. So that's where all the Red Squirrel project came about.
I think that's a theme, isn't it, with like nature photography or wildlife photography is breaking down those barriers. I think that seems to be a strong theme, really, and pictures are really powerful to do that.
Yeah.
If they're in a fun way, like you've done, I think it grabs that interest, but then you've got their attention then, haven't you? That audience, you can tell them the story behind. Yeah,
it's a great hook. It really is, and these red squirrels, you'd be surprised where they are. They're in Premiership football clubs. They're in Mercedes Formula One factory. Royalty have got them. They're all over the place. They really have. They've spread far and wide. We've had film crews up from the BBC, also from ITV. They're featured in the national red top papers. They really have. They've brought a lot of exposure to actually their own survival, really, to help with their own survival. So they've done well for a garden rodent. They've done exceptionally well.
I think it's a great example of a few things of the photographer. When we know more about our subject matter and when we get involved and engaged in that, I think you then start to see that in the work, because there's a passion in it, isn't there, for the photography. We touched a bit about commercial work sometimes being slightly different. You can still have a passion for that, but you know what I mean. And I think, like you said, with the fun and the hook, and then maybe that's when you get to the real meat of, well, what's the story about, is about the struggles they might be facing. And then, as a visual artist, I think that's probably something that you've taken, enjoyment from, is highlighting that work. But I think in terms of today as well, I know there'll be plenty of photographers watching this, because obviously we're generally talking to photographers, and I'm just thinking, just from a purely technical point of view, there must have been many challenges, especially in these jumping images, and maybe we can use this as an example, just from a pure setup, planning, tech spec point of view. Can you run us through some of the work you did? Because I would imagine it took a bit of finessing to get to the point where you were snapping exactly how you wanted to, and what were you looking for, and what were those challenges?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mentioned the climbing frame, which I have the squirrels comfortable on now, and this is actually split into two. And the front part of the climbing frame has no access from the ground up. It's got baffles on, so the squirrel can't actually climb up to the front part of the apparatus, but that's where the nuts are. So the squirrel has to jump across from the part of the apparatus which is separated behind. So at that point, once I've got them jumping, and they're so quick, by the way, they cover like 2 meters in 0.4 of a second. It's more of a flick than a jump. Incredibly fast. But then moving on from that, each squirrel tends to jump from a different height, or reaches a different height when it's in midair. So you have to adjust your camera's height to make sure you catch it in its best. And obviously, you want to catch it with quite large in the frame, so you've got all the megapixels, so you've got plenty of quality. But at the same time, you don't want it drifting outside of the frame. So there's a lot of trial and error that goes into these pictures. This particular one we're looking at now, you'll see that the squirrel's ears are sort of looped over to the left-hand side. And that's because when the squirrel is wet, it shakes mid-air. It doesn't shake before it jumps. It actually shakes when it's in the air, and that's actually what it's doing there. And you can see the snow coming off it. Since I've lived in this house, it snowed once, and I was so excited because I wanted to get a red squirrel shot jumping in the snow. So I managed to get it on this occasion, but I could only do that because I'd took thousands and thousands of jumping squirrel shots. I've learned which way, certainly which shutter speed I need, what aperture I need. And being in the garden as well, Sam, I needed to get good subject separation. So I couldn't really stop down too much because you'd start seeing the fence line in the back and, the trees, etc. So it was always a balance to find the depth of field that worked, what aperture you need to be to affect that depth of field, the correct shutter speed. And this picture, because it's snowing, the snow is actually on the ground, so it's almost acting like a reflector underneath the squirrel. So it's showing all the detail in the shadows as well. So there's a lot to like in this, and it's one of my favourites, jumping squirrel shots.
Yeah, I think it's great because there's the character, but also just photographically, it's so strong because of the composition, because of the light. And I think it's interesting because, you're treating it in the same way, or in many similar ways, as you might, a fashion shoot or a portrait shoot. We've got to think about lighting. Where's the subject? What's got to be sharp? How is our lighting contributing to the image strength? All the rest of it, And although we're dealing with a wild animal or the natural environment, should we say, where things go slightly out of your control, which makes it harder because we can't just move the subject matter backwards or forwards. They're going to do what they want to do. I suppose that's part of the challenge, but all your skills, I suppose that's what I'm saying, of previous work in portrait situations or commercial situations, you can then add into this situation so that you can control the controllables, right, and deal with the uncontrollables as best as you can.
Really great points. I mean, there's a couple of points there. One is, Sam, I've been told so many times over the years that to get really good in photography, you must only shoot one genre and concentrate on that and really hone it. And I've always resisted that because I think that the more genres what you shoot, the better the skill set. And invariably, they all come together anyway. A lot of this red squirrel photography is the same as what I do in sports photography. Long lenses, 400mm, f2.8. Good fast autofocus acquisition. Good awareness of what shutter speed you need to freeze the action. So many things come into the furore. I've even lit these squirrels with a pair of rotor lights when I needed to light them in darkness. But as you say, all that experience of portrait work, different types of different genres, they do roll into one. And anybody that I mentor now, I always say to them, don't get bogged down into one genre. If that's the genre you want to work and you do have to get good at it, but try everything and learn from everything, because it does all come in. There's a massive crossover. I mean, for argument's sake, for a sports assignment, I might be asked to photograph a stadium as part of the assignment. So then I'm looking at sort of architectural photography, having an awareness of what will work, what won't, making sure we pay particular attention to distortion of using a wide angle lens in such a big stadium. And then you may be doing interacting with fans outside. Then you're doing sort of street photography, environmental photography. You might be photographing some of the players. You've got the pitch side action. So when you look at just at that one assignment, there's so many different genres which roll into one. And I think it's really important that people really do photograph a range of genres if they can.
Yeah, it's a great point, and the people booking you to do that work aren't aware of those differences and don't care. More to the point, and don't need to know. You just need to deliver, right? But it's you as the working photographer. We have the awareness to deal with those 4, 3, 4, 5, 6, however many different scenarios they are. I think that's a really great point. That background work then means you can just concentrate and deliver that without having to think settings, whatever it might be. That has to be under the belt, doesn't it? And obviously that's clear when we see this sort of work. You can only achieve that when all that is kind of given, really, in a way. So just to finish up on the Red Squirrel project, because I think it's really fun. If we kind of bring the printing side of things in, I know you've put together panels of the work, and were there any particular challenges or things you were? I mean, I would think color, is a really important thing in printing these, and consistency of aesthetic, etc. So if we sort of link it to the printing side of things, is there anything you've taken away from this or experiences that you'd want to pass on about that?
Yeah, I mean, I've just done a fellowship with the Red Squirrel Project, with the Society of Photographers at the London Convention. So Tim was very helpful, helping me get the best out of the printer we use and the papers. I think paper choice first off has got to be your first consideration. And I did try a number of different papers. Normally the Barita, the Platinum Barita 300 is my favourite. But even if you've got a favourite paper, try different papers, because you might find something that suits it better. It's easy to slip into just using the same paper and over. So I actually printed the panel on Photo Smooth Pearl 290, and I found that suited this panel much better than the Barita. The colours were a little bit more vibrant, and it still held the blacks really well, the contrast as well on the paper. And paper's really important, paper choice. People think, the photography is everything, and they can just print out on a gloss or a matte. But it's so important what you put your ink onto. Really important, and I'd highly recommend that anybody speaks to Tim or Vince or anyone at Fotospeed if they want any help. They are really great at that. The second consideration was the actual content for the panel, and I did want to have a good mix. So I had some jump shots and some more of the pictures interacting with props, like a red squirrel sitting in the car, the saxophone, one riding a motorbike, and all these different things. But when you put a panel together in terms of print, it's the actual panel needs to be, it needs to flow and it needs to sit well. It needs to be easy on the eye. So unfortunately, after speaking about this snow shot, what we're looking at now, that couldn't go in the panel because it was different from the rest. We needed to have consistent colours right the way through, and that's really important. Fotospeed will do a custom profile. They also make available generic profiles for certain printers and their papers, and that really helps because it really gives you that extra step really to nail the colours and make sure they're consistent throughout. So again, good paper choice. Use the ICC profiles from Fotospeed is the next bit, and then you start to print. When you do print, you see things in print, or I do anyway, which you don't necessarily see on the computer screen. So often you need to reprint, you need to do some proofing, and then you need to put it all together and make sure it sits well, get a nice set of mounts, and when it's finished, you can stand back and really admire it. And it's doing a panel and printing your work. I think it's so beneficial to the photographer. The amount of attention we pay to a digital image, it doesn't come close to what you pay to a print. A print has got an emotional impact. You can hold it, you can look at it, you can pass it around. Everybody is seeing exactly the same, and it's there forever. When you show somebody, perhaps a digital image on your phone or your computer, they might look at it for 30 seconds or something. It's gone. It's disappeared. But that print is so powerful. And I always say that a photograph isn't a photograph unless you've printed it. It's just a flick of light. So again, I'd highly recommend people get in touch with Fotospeed if they don't print. If they do print, get in touch with Fotospeed anyway and find out about the PC profile and the choices.
Yeah, I think I really like your point about you always see something on the print that you didn't notice on the screen. I think I'm exactly the same. I don't know if you are, Sam. You just and you look at it and you think, well, how did I not see that? And you kind of, it's so obvious, isn't it? Usually, and you just think, oh God, look at it. How did I not see that? And I always do it. I still do it now. So it's yeah.
A couple of
I think
times,
that's, yeah.
A couple of times I've sprinted back to the monitor because I've been convinced that light area or the light blaze was not on the computer screen. And when I get to the computer, I go, oh yeah, it's there.
Yeah.
It's there, yeah. Guaranteed.
No, I think that's, it's a really good point. And also when you're putting together bodies of work, I like you, Terry, I have to kind of have them printed to really understand the relationships between them. Some of that work you can try and do on the screen, but I find it's way easier when you can physically hold it. And I think just as a final point on this, and then we'll maybe move to a couple of the other things, is when we are seeing images of wildlife like this, that we wouldn't necessarily have the chance or time to study these creatures in that detail because we can't freeze them in reality. We can in the camera, and so a print of a species like this is great because you can really pay attention to the detail, the face, the physical attributes, their character, and that's something we can't normally do with wildlife, so I would imagine when people have seen these, has that been the reaction? Have you had a good feedback from people seeing the work like that?
It's a really, really good point what you make. And what you do when you're showing people a view which they would not normally see. And that's where the impact comes in on any print. If you can present something that they've not seen before, maybe, I don't know how many people have seen jumping squirrels, jumping through the snow before. I certainly haven't. You're showing them that, but also there's that connection as well, because when you look at this squirrel, you've got the both eyes on show, which is great. You can see the determination in its face, although it doesn't have a humanized face. But there's that connection there. You can feel the eagerness and the forcefulness to make that jump. And that's something really a print really brings across. I should have mentioned before as well about a good thing about printing at home is that if you get prints done at a lab, you've got to send it off. You've got to hope that they, do all the colour balancing before they start the prints off. And then you get your prints back and they may not be what you want. So then you've got to order them again. But when you're working on your printing from home, it's that dynamic. You're getting the print straight away. You can alter anything what you want to do. And that's one of the most powerful things about having a home printer, I think.
Yeah, great.
It's just quicker, isn't it? You just got that immediate. You just got that immediacy, haven't you? And
it's instant feedback, isn't it?
Terry, so just as we kind of move on, I just want to spend a few minutes as we come towards the end of our chat. I know we focused a lot on that Red Squirrel Project, but I think that's really neat, especially for our focus on wildlife in May with Fotospeed. We've talked at the top that you do a broad amount of different types of work, and people book you because I think they know you can handle those different situations and bring your own story to it. There's one particular thing we wanted to touch on was I believe is this correct? This is the air ambulance in Wiltshire. Is that the work you did with those guys? There was some really great imagery I saw when you put some of it out on socials at the time you were doing it, and I just remember it. Well, that's the point. I remember it. And we're all drowning in so many images, and I can't quite put my finger on why, but I think it was just so evocative. And I know there will have been technical choices you will have made, but if you can just tell us a couple of minutes about that experience that you had working with that team, and whether you learnt things and how you had to approach it from a photographic point of view with such a specific subject matter.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's Wiltshire Air Ambulance. I've actually photographed on 2 occasions with them. The 2 images we're looking at now were from the first visit. I went back and did a COVID visit for them last year, but this was the first one. So when we went out actually on call, the staff were available to help. They actually brought extra crews in because there was training taking place as well during this period. I would commandeer one of the pilots, and this is Big Rob, and he is big. He's 6'7", And I said, Rob, can I just have you in front of the hangar for a bit? And we just come out with the idea that, we try and get the reflected shot in the visor. And shot this at 24mm with a G Master lens, Sony G Master f1.4 wide open, just to really knock that background out of focus and give that subject separation. I took a low angle, so I had to do a little bit of limbo dancing in front of Big Rob. And just till we got that reflection right, obviously exposed the camera manually for the reflection. That was the main part of the image, what we wanted. But it's just the story, really, of the pilot facing Helimed 22, which is their aircraft call sign. And it just adds a little bit of a cinematic feel to it, really. I've cropped it 16:9. So that was that one. That was the purpose of that.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt, Terry. I was going to ask, did they come to you with a fairly specific brief, or did they just want you to come and document in the way you did and make a body of work out the back of it?
Well, I'll tell you what it was, Sam. Sony, I didn't mention earlier, I'm a Sony European Imaging Ambassador. And one of the things that Sony like their ambassadors to do is to bring real life stories to life. Now, I had worked with the Northwest Air Ambulance going back to 2014. So I had a background of working with emergency services anyway. And through a friend of mine, I was put in touch with the CEO of Wiltshire Air Ambulance. And they've got a purpose-built airbase, which was, I think it's only about 4 or 5 years old now. They've got all the charity operation in there. They've got all the medics. They've got obviously the aircraft and the pilots. And it looked like a great place to shoot a project. So I actually contacted the CEO there and introduced myself. And I said, look, I'd like to do some work with you to raise awareness of your funding requirements, because all our air ambulances across the UK do not receive any direct government funding. And mainly they rely on public donations and fundraising. So I went down, had the meeting with them. Sony very kindly sponsored all the work. And we ended up with a fantastic set of images, which we then thought we would do a number of print exhibitions. So I contacted Fotospeed, and again, I said, look, can you help with the print? And I think it was Toby at the time and Vince I spoke to, and they said, absolutely. And fair play to them. They supplied A2, A3, A4 prints mounted onto foam board. And we actually held an exhibition at the airbase. We also had one at the Royal Photographic Society in Bath, and also at the Societies of Photographers convention that year in London. So massive thank you to Fotospeed again for that. Really, really helped us out a lot. And that work went out, it went into national press, it went into specialist press, the emergency magazines, aviation magazines. And even now today, the Wiltshire Air Ambulance is still getting a lot of attention, a lot of coverage from that project, what we shot. Obviously going there, it was a big trust factor, really, what they put into me. But when we were photographing, nothing came in front of the life-saving service, what they do. So I literally was working with a couple of cameras, and I couldn't, certainly when I was flying with them, I couldn't take anything with me extra. It was literally 2 cameras. I was weighed in the morning, so we got the fuel loads right, and I had to wear them cameras all the time. And the second there was a call in, I had to be ready to just be on board the aircraft and be away. So nothing could come in between that service. So for this picture, for instance, I couldn't go out with a tripod or doing anything too fancy. We literally had to be there that if a call came in, we could just walk straight back in, get what we needed to board the aircraft and fly off. So that was the agreement, really. Nothing could come in front of any missions or cause any delays to any responses.
Yeah, cool. It sounds like a really cool experience. And I think that just what you mentioned there about having the print exhibition at their base, I would imagine they got a kick from seeing the images, and that for morale internally, I'm sure must have been really good, as well as all the press that it garnered, more from a national point of view.
It really was, Sam, because I mean, we see these guys like this from where we are. They never see themselves looking like this. So another one of the pilots, he actually picked the A2 print up and he stood holding it, for a couple of minutes, just staring into it. And I said, "What do you think?" He said, "I've no idea the way I looked, the expression I had, and how intense I am when I'm getting the aircraft ready to fly." He said, "I love it." And it's a little bit of a gift back for them as well, being able to show them this type of work. I mean, this picture here, for instance, this is Nikki. Nikki will never see herself like this. She's jumped in the aircraft, she's doing the pre-flight checks. But a couple of things in this, we've got her hand on the center console there, with the white glove running, her arm leading her up to her face. You can see how intense she is, what she's doing. We're also showing the environment she's in. We're showing the cockpit controls, joystick. Is it a joystick?
Oh yeah, I know what you mean. Yes.
Yeah, is it called a joystick? Anyway,
I think we'll go with yes.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
But it's just showing the environment. And again, Nikki saw this and she said, "I'm taken aback by it because I've never had that sort of the ability to see how I look and the concentration I've got when I'm getting the aircraft ready." So in that sort of point of view, yeah, it's and the print adds so much to that as well. Seeing it on screen is one thing, but seeing it in large on an A2 print is something else.
I think and maybe just final point on this, because I want to finish in a minute on the fantastic Liverpool team and football club, because I know you're a fan and I'm a little bit of a fan, but we won't go into that. I think the point of view that where we're seeing these images from, I think when I reflected on it was one of the reasons why I remembered these images so much, because like you say, they're not used to seeing it, but no one would necessarily have their head down in this position, and just seeing it from the points of views you've chosen, I think really emphasize the type of work they're doing. And you can't stage this. It has to be, these are the legit guys doing the legit job, and that shows then in the imagery. You could set up a studio thing to do something, but it wouldn't have that same impact, I don't think, personally speaking, as being out there and doing it. And obviously that's what makes stronger work. So fab stuff on that. I think just from a time point of view, if we just finish on a couple of other things, and we appreciate you chatting away with us, Terry. We know we're eating up your time. But Tim, I think if we can move through, we've touched on some of the things architecturally and everything else, but I did want to, as we flick through these, I did want us to finish on football, Terry, because you do work with Liverpool and you cover Champions League football and all sorts of other sports, as we've talked about. And as a Liverpool fan, is that like the glory job is getting this sort of assignment?
It's getting close to it, Sam. It's getting close to it. Yeah, as a Liverpool fan, being able to go to Anfield and shoot pitch side, be involved in as one of the a member of the media when we had the victory parade when they won the 6th Champions League title. It's just fantastic, isn't it? It's I mean, this particular day, I was actually flying out to cover the Champions League final, and there was an issue where I couldn't go. So I was given a place on the lead media bus for the victory parade. This was scheduled to last for a couple of hours. It took 4.5 hours to get around the route. 750,000 people out. It was just incredible, and it just didn't stop all the way around. And I've got about 6,000 images from that day. Most of them I've not even looked at yet, so I'll need to do at some point. But yeah, it's just that added bit of a kick, really. I mean, if you're a football fan and you can actually work in any way covering your club, it's just so much more interest in it.
Yeah, and I think actually just on this particular image, I love it because of the crowd and the atmosphere, and the temptation could have been, and I'm sure you had a variety of different shots, but just to get in tight on the guys holding the trophy. But the story is it's a parade and the fans are interacting, and especially with Liverpool, there's that deep connection, I think, with the fans. I don't want to go into a football chat, but I think we both know, that's the case. And seeing that red, and which is so synonymous with them, and the fans, and the excitement and the fervour, for me, it's just an absolutely perfect capture of that moment. And that's what photography can be. We've talked about it, haven't we, with the power of photography.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, a couple of things came together on this picture. There's what you can't see is actually there's a truck between that bus and the bus I was on, and they had fired the tickers, which are the red ribbons you can see floating, and they'd also fired somebody set a flare off in the crowd, I think, or it might have been the truck. I'm not too sure, but that's actually given us a separation between that bus and the background. It's the little layer of haze there and the tickers. It's all the faces. Most of the people we can see on that bus, we can see the faces. The crowds, we can see the Liverpool showing clearly on the flags which are waving. We've got people climbing up onto road signs. We've even got a balloon, European Cup, on the right-hand side, just hanging in the air. And it's just, a lot of elements that really just came to in this.
Yeah, I think that could be a huge sort of 40-metre print somewhere in Liverpool. They'd love that. I'm not sure we can arrange that, but a street, a big street picture, that'd be awesome.
We did print it pretty big for the photography show, didn't we, Terry? I think we did, didn't we? I can't remember. I remember seeing a big print of it. I remember.
Yeah, I think we did do a big print at one point. Yeah.
Yeah, not much good for Everton fans, but there we go. Or Man United fans. We won't go there. We don't want to upset anybody. Listen, well, I think
regardless of your club, I think, but we've all got to celebrate the success of our English clubs really in Europe, because they're stepping outside of the domestic arena really, and they are representing England. So it's great to see them winning, whoever it is. Obviously, prefer a bit of Liverpool, but.
But and it means a lot to a lot of people, and whether that's the rugby union that they follow or whatever, it's a passion for a lot of people, isn't it? And I think that's what comes through in this imagery. Just as we wrap up, then I'll just ask, and then maybe if Tim has anything extra to add, Terry, is there anything you're working on in the background, or any sort of personal projects that you or places even, or types of shooting that you've not done that you'd really like to? Is there anything on the roadmap, or are you just fairly flexible to what's thrown at you?
I'm fairly flexible. We are talking about doing a photo essay. The Wiltshire Ambulance have actually employed doctors now to be part of the crew, so they can do levels of treatment on site, which is above the paramedics' remit. So we're talking about that, how we're going to do that. Obviously, the football we're still continuing with, and certainly the Red Squirrel Project is ongoing. But always looking out for a project. But at the moment, outside of those three arenas, we're pretty much just continuing. But we'll see. I mean, I'm a great believer, Sam, that things come along and opportunities coming your way, for a reason, and we should take every single opportunity that we're presented with. And I don't believe in chasing anything too hard, because if an opportunity is meant for you, it will come along and present itself. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens this year.
Cool. Any final thoughts, Tim, before we just wrap up?
No, I think Terry said it all. Really, I think it's brilliant. Yeah, I'll just sit back and listen to Terry usually when he's talking. So,
well, I think we've covered a lot of stuff, and I think we've covered a lot of stuff, and the realities of being photographers and what inspires and what motivates, and then obviously getting things out into print, which is obviously what we rave on about here at Fotospeed. But I think we've had some nice examples of how that's the case. So. We'll finish our recording here, Terry, and we'll say thank you very much. It's great to chat.
You, Sam.
And I'm sure we'll see you again soon at an exhibition event or something else. And if anyone wants to follow Terry, just check out his website. Usual places on the internet. You can find him and keep up with him on social media for all sorts of work that he's been up to as well. But for us today, I will say thank you very much, and we'll speak to you again another time soon. Cheerio.
Thanks, Sam.